Hello, welcome everyone. I'm going to say good morning, I'm going to say good afternoon, and I'm going to say good evening, depending on what time zone you're in, because the three of us are spanning multiple time zones. Yeah. So before we get started, I'm going to just do a couple of housekeeping things, which is always an important way to start, right? We want to hear from you guys. So if you want to speak, there's two ways that we can actually hear from you. So the first is there's the raise your hand function at the bottom. So if you actually just click on that, raise your hand, one of us will see that. And then also there is the Q&A function at the end as well. We will be doing a Q&A. So what we're going to ask is that we tally everything up, your questions as we go through, so that we have the flow going, and then we will visit the questions at the end. Okay, so that's housekeeping out of the way. Now let's get to the show on the road. So I have to say that when I was approached by these two wonderful people to do this, there was nothing more that I was excited about. I have known both of them for a very long time, both personally and professionally. So I feel really blessed. So I am Angela Salk. I am currently the Global Chief Commercial Officer, not communications.
Get it right.
I know, I don't even know my own title, right? Chief Commercial Officer at Blipper. I'm an ex-agency client platform person. And right now I am joined by the absolutely fabulous Emma Harris and the stunning DDS. So let me give you a little bit of background on the two of them and how things are going to go. So Emma is the chief at Glow in London, and she has actually graced Eurostar, Virgin along the way. But let's stop at Eurostar for one quick second, because that's where her and DDS met many, many years ago. And that is where the spark of brilliance with these two people started. So DDS, when Emma was at Eurostar, she was heading up brand and sales and marketing. And when DDS was there, he was organizational development. So the two of them created magic for that organization. And what has sparked out of that is the unbelievable programs that they have created for brands and for individuals along the way. So where have they, gone on since? So DDS has gone on to senior roles at where him and I worked together, actually, at WPP. We were both at WPP at Essence, and he was the Chief Learning and Cultural Officer. And it's really important to understand that that was one of the first roles in companies to actually before the curve, when it was now that it's trendy, they actually invested in that before it was the trendy thing to do. And Emma has really taken on the role of chief executive of her family, of Glow, of the world. Exactly. But today I'm given the immense honor of standing in the middle of these two individuals for the next 45 minutes to battle it out on brand culture or culture brand. So we all know that having a strong brand is fundamental. It's fundamental to the success of the business. And equally, though, it's just as important that the culture matters. And the culture is why you attract talent, why they stay. But tonight we're here to debate, or actually it's not even today, this morning, we're here to debate what is the biggest factor in driving a business's growth. So I'm going to do my best to keep these two on their toes. But without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our panelists. Emma, I'm going to let you start and introduce yourself.
Well, thank you. And as you say, lifelong friend and colleague. So yes, well, you've done my intro. So I am obviously representing brand in today's debate. I just firstly want to say to my esteemed colleague DDS that I am obviously a massive fan of culture. When I say brand, I just want to be clear that I don't mean marketing. And I think that's often where people get confused. I always talk about now, when I was at Eurostar, I could do beautiful ads with amazing directors like Juan Cabral. But if you walk into the St. Pancras and meet someone with a face like a slapdaff, you've kind of ruined it. So a lot of my focus, and those of you who are listening in from Eurostar will remember, a lot of my focus and energy went in supporting sort of HR and learning development and our style of service and operations, customer service, and spreading. That's what brand is to me. And because of that, even though culture is so important in terms of that delivery, for me, it starts with the brand. The brand has to be felt everywhere. I mean, there's lots of research. Ipsos and Mori did a poll. 64% of customers who have an experience that doesn't match what they expected the brand to do will not come back. I once had a client who I asked me to drive their cultural change in the middle of a process where they were delivering on the brand, and the brand wasn't there yet. And I felt like I was kind of driving a car without the wheels. So this is not me at all saying culture isn't important. It's fundamental to any business that's thriving and brilliant. But for me, brand, it starts with the brand. Brand is what your customers need from you. It's about really understanding your customer and reflecting the unique way that you own that. And because of that, it has to inform your strategy, your product, your service, your communication, your tone of voice, your behavior, your mindset. And because of that, I don't know how business can even get up in the morning without knowing its brand. So that's my point of view. And I shall now stop banging on and let DDS have their word.
Emma, never, ever, ever stop banging on. Of course, it's important. But, back in the 1950s, Peter Drucker, the author, said that culture will eat strategy for breakfast. And in doing so, I think articulated the critical role that culture plays in business success. And, more recently, Simon Sinek said that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So, i.e., your customers that you spoke about, Em, are buying an experience, and an experience that is built, made, or served by the organization's people. So the way in which your people build, make, or serve, and the quality of the experience they create for your customer is, I believe, the difference that makes the difference between a successful business and a not so successful business. And so it's for those reasons that I say culture will not only eat brand for breakfast, but it will also eat it for lunch and dinner.
Woo, all right, game on. So, all right, let's start with the first question, because I know you guys are super passionate about it. So I want to start out by understanding what you feel the role of brand is within a company. And what I'd love is give me some tangible examples.
Are you asking that for me?
Yep. Well, you're the brand.
You're in the brand corner.
Oh, brand. Sorry,
brand corner, girlfriend. It's you.
I think it's brand is everything. That's kind of Glow's. That's Glow's raison d'etre. Brand is everything. And again, our uniqueness is that we connect brand and culture. That we don't want to start with we don't see brand as a pretty wrapping paper that's used to attract people. So brand, therefore, should inform. And I've sort of reeled off a list before, but everything. It's because it's your mindset. It should inform your values and your behaviors, therefore who you recruit, how you reward and recognize performance. I always talk about, the guy in finance who might think that he's ticking every box because his P&L looks good and his cash flow looks good. You can see I'm not a finance person. I don't know what I'm talking about, but his debtor days are down. These are all the KPIs I keep hearing, but maybe his debtor days are down and his cash flow is good because he's paying people in 90 days and he's not using ethical suppliers, and the way he communicates isn't on brand. So your brand has to help inform everything. And if your brand is, so for example, you're champion of the people, yet you're not supporting your suppliers in that way or choosing them in the right way, procurement aren't abroad. It has to all be lined up behind the brand. So I can't think of many things in the business it doesn't inform, because your brand should be a shorthand. If you think about those big brands, and I'll use global brands because we have such a global audience, but, you know, the obvious ones, Apple, IBM, you know, Starbucks, IKEA, you know, you can walk into an Apple store anywhere in the world, know exactly what you're going to get, right? You can walk into IKEA. They're about creating better lives for people every day. That's their lens. They know the street they own. They're not going to start doing luxury. You know, they're not ashamed to say it's affordable, it's convenient. Yeah, you've got to build it yourself, but they stay in their lane, and that's a brand informs everything. And you know, in any business, for me, like I said, it's that lens that you look through.
Very interesting, actually, and I probably want to dissect a couple of those from DDS's lens now of those examples, because I would like to understand the role of culture within a company. And tell me, DDS, who does it well? And on those brands that Emma just gave you, are those all brands that you think from a cultural perspective deliver?
Well, it's interesting, you know, just riffing off of what Emma shared when Emma used an example of Apple, because I'm like, yeah, I mean, Apple, we are an Apple house here, just, you know, and strong brand. But also, you know, if you ask anybody on the inside of Apple, they'll tell you that Apple has very clearly said, you know, our people are not our most important asset. So I wonder what that does for, here's a cat. I wonder what that does. Hi, Hemingway. I wonder what that does for the experience that the people are having, you know? And so, and then, if just take a look at Facebook, I mean, Meta or whatever, you know, the challenge that, or the press that has been surfacing over the last few days with the rename, and it's a rename, but they've been calling it a rebrand, which couldn't be further from the truth from my perspective, because still inside is all of the rotten behavior, processes and policies that we know exist. So I think it's really hard to pinpoint organizations that do culture well, because most of the time we'll look to, well, who made the top of the greatest places to work surveys? And quite frankly, most of the people that make it to the top of those types of surveys have paid to be there. So I think culture has an incredibly important role, right, in all of this, because culture, I think, at least from my perspective, I never like to think about culture, whether it's good or bad, or whether it's strong or weak. Just the question that I want organizations to think about is our culture appropriate? Is our culture going to deliver what we need it to deliver? And so, you know, we'll take the Eurostar example. I remember that, you know, when I was being recruited to work at Eurostar, at the time, the brand was all about Kylie Minogue and John Malkovich. Now, Kylie Minogue walking through the streets of Paris, what queer person isn't going to go, I need to go work at that organization? Like, if I bump into Kylie, if I rub shoulders with Kylie, like, it's all of my gay dreams come true. And then the day, April the 12th, 2004, I walked in through the doors of Eurostar, and it was like I'd hit a cultural brick wall. The message that was being sold was not the experience that was being had. And honestly, Em, if it hadn't have been for you and meeting you on the second day, I probably would have backed out, because I'm like, I've been sold something that isn't true. And so any organization can have a strong brand, but if it doesn't deliver on that in its culture, you're going to see low levels of morale and high levels of attrition. It's as simple as that.
Really good points. I actually, DDS, also want to delve into some of the things, you know, from a cultural perspective. It has to have been struggles for organizations. We all went remote. The world went, you know, changed so dramatically over the last 18 months, when some of us thought it would be 2 weeks that we'd be in quarantine, not, you know, almost 2 years later at this point. So, you know, I want to talk about cultural fabric and the why and the what and the how around that, and the role that it has to play now that you don't have that office culture anymore.
Yeah, I mean, so you use the term cultural fabric, which just to explain what I think about when I use that term, and I think about the collection of the mission, the vision, the values, and the behaviors that go to describe the why, the what, and the how of the organization, that lead to an articulation of the kind of vibe, the kind of employee experience that you want to create. And that's an overt statement of intent. But there's a difference between culture, that overt statement of intent, and the lived experience of the climate. And I think the climate is actually much more important than the culture, because the climate, the lived experience, is the thing that drives customers' experience of interacting with the brand. And it also drives the kind of the relationships, the experience that people have. I don't think I've answered your question.
That's okay. It was more.
I think I'm answering the question I want to answer, which is very politician-like of me, which couldn't be further from the truth.
Well, I think that what you're hitting on is that there isn't a simple answer to my question, right? It's an onion that gets peeled back, and what's happened is that to be able to live all of those things in our current environment is definitely a challenge.
Oh, that's right. You asked about where's the office culture when there is no office. Thank you. Well, thanks. You know, it's been really interesting, because for many, many years, and there's many people on this call that I've worked with, for many years, I was like, you've got to be in person. You know, culture is built in person, and to do the job that I do, I've got to be with the people. And then, of course, 2020 came along and was like, oh, really? That's what you think? I'll show you. And everything about my in-personness was turned on its head, including, by the way, my clinical practice. And so when I'm seeing patients for psychotherapy, that's all been online. And I have been able to build rapport and establish relationships and facilitate change with patients that is so profound that I didn't think would ever happen if we weren't in person. And the same goes for coaching, the same goes for facilitation, consultation, all of that sort of stuff. And so I don't think you need an office to build a culture. What you need is a solid intent, and what you need is the ability to build rapport.
Wonderful. That's super helpful. So actually, in our prep, I didn't actually give you this question to you, Emma, but I'm going on the fly now based on what DDS
Wait,
said.
you've already gone on the fly.
Exactly. No, I'm loving this.
I know, but
like, where are we in the?
No, it doesn't matter. Let's go off piece. It's much more exciting.
But I want to ask you about the role of brand in this new world that we've been living in for the last 20 months, give or take, and the challenge that brands have had, and the new world that they have to live in as well, because they've had to pivot a lot. So I'm curious how you think about the role of brand in our new normal.
First of all, I'd like to say I love the fact that DDS sort of feels that 2020 came along to challenge his perception, particularly about you have to be in person. And then 2020 came along to challenge me. So now we all know why it happened. Thank you, DDS.
You're welcome.
But yeah, I mean, I've talked a lot about this, and then I've probably bored everyone on my LinkedIn about this, that for me, the brands that have survived well in this last 2 years of madness are the ones that knew who they were. Because if you understand your DNA, if you have a brand, and again, I'm slightly pissing on my own argument because I'll link it to culture, but the brands that already had their brand linked into culture, that knew who they were, that had those behaviors already, that had the right mindset, are the ones that have succeeded. Because if you know, and again, if brand is the thing that makes you stand out, the thing that is connecting the needs of your customer with how you uniquely meet that, and you can stay close to your customer to always feel what's going on with them, if that's who you are as a business, you're going to be able to ebb and flow. I think the brands that have done best are the ones, big lesson for me is slightly cliched, but you can only prepare, not plan. It's the brands that were flexible, that said, right, let's pivot. I'll use an example of a British brand, sorry to the US audience. They're called Dishoom. They're not a massive brand, but they're a restaurant group here, and or Dish Room, as my son called them yesterday. But they during the pandemic, a lot of restaurant brands went, right, we're going to do takeaways, right? That's the answer. But Dishoom was so one of their real pillars is this sort of quality and the fresh food. And they were absolutely adamant that their food would not be delivered. It wouldn't work. It would destroy their brand. So I love the fact that Hemingway is so featured in this event. And so they said, right, well, they did those kits, they sold the kits so you can make it yourself. And it's just about the clarity of that decision making. Brands that are really clear on who they are, what their values are, what their narrative is, what their story is, will have been able to very quickly make decisions and how they pivot and how their businesses have to change and how to hold people together when they're not together. Because if your cultural fabric, using DDS's language, if your cultural fabric is strong enough, it will hold you together. But for me, the two are so intrinsic. My argument is just the brand comes first. I'm not in, Glow is all about brand and culture. But for me, you said yourself, DDS, it starts with the why. That's what Simon Sinek talks about. It starts with the why. Kind of rest my case, and.
Well, mic drop, but we're keeping on going.
I dropped a pen.
Drop mic, and we're going to keep going though. And we're going to keep going because it's really, for me, when you guys were asking me about these topics, what I was personally really struggling with is global brands that I think do both exceptionally well. I really struggled with that because even in some of the examples I've heard from both of you guys, I could kind of counter and go, well, I think they do one or the other. And so I want to dig into that a little bit more and really understand from your guys, vantage points from culture and from brand. Talk to me about the challenges of being able to do both of these, brand and culture exceptionally well. And why is this so challenging? And DDS, we're going to pivot to you.
Yeah. So there's this kind of mythical, magical number out there of 150 and there are people that have talked about that once a company gets to 150 people in size, then there's a tipping point at which the culture, or as I like to call it, prefer to think about, climate shifts, right? And that's because sorry.
What is that, the cat?
They never come in here when
of all the things we thought could go wrong, we did not protect against.
Never work with children or animals. That's what they say. It's so typical. So there's this magic number of 150 where people say there's a tipping point that happens in the culture, because at that point an organization begins to mature and the organization brings in additional layers and policies and processes and procedures necessary for its survival. But what happens is that there is a distance that grows between the people and the original idea, the original core reason for the organization being in existence. And so that's why, right? That's one of the reasons why, as you grow in size, you tend to lose the ability to create the climate that is as closely aligned to the cultural intention that is stated within the brand architecture. That's why it gets hard.
Okay. I mean, I just want to remind everybody, if you have questions as we're going along, please put them in the Q&A and we'll get to that. I just don't want people to forget, because you guys are bringing up some great topics along the way. All right, M, same question.
Just before you go back to M, I'm not done.
Oh, you're not? Oh, I'm so sorry. I assumed you were.
I thought you were.
Well, I've got another thing that comes from really, very personal experience. Is it goes wrong when culture or climate is owned by the HR team. And because it becomes somebody else's problem. And what I will harp on about a lot is the climate of any organization is shaped by the worst behavior that you're willing to tolerate in a leader. Mm. And when the culture and climate is owned by the HR team, those leaders get away with a ton of crap that they wouldn't get away with if they felt ownership over the shaping of the climate and the culture. So it's those two things, right? It beyond 150, it starts to become hard to manage. It's even harder to manage and to evolve and to nurture if it is the job of a function rather than something that is owned by the leadership team.
I'm going to just jump in here, Ange, and just say I couldn't agree with you more. From the other side of the fence, when brand is owned by marketing, a business hasn't got a hope in hell. I mean, if people think the brand is a responsibility of the marketing team, then everyone needs to kind of go home, because like I've said, brand has to be delivered by everyone, whether you're in finance or HR. I've written loads about the perfect marriage that we had, DDS, between HR and marketing, that the brand has got to be with the responsibility of the CEO down. That, if your brand is what makes you stand out, it's everyone's job to deliver on it so that it's felt with every tiny touch point in the company. So I completely agree with you. Brand cannot be this sort of, lipstick on a pig. It cannot be a wrapping paper. I can't control my tongue. I apologize. It can't be that sort of attractive thing. Let the marketing people own the brand. Brand people think it's the logo, it's your colors. It's not. It's your fabric. It's your DNA. It's your essence. It's your raison d'etre for all the French people that are listening. But yeah, one of the issues is that is not delivered. That's not believed. And the brands that do it, the businesses that believe that brand is owned by everyone, they're the ones that thrive. And the challenge is that usually it doesn't. And there's this siloed mentality where I'm looking at performance from a sort of linear vertical way, where my job is to, deal with finance or fix the trains. And actually you don't realize that everyone's job is to deliver the brand. So yeah, I'm saying exactly the same, but from the other side.
I've always loved your French accent, Em.
Oh, thank you. You're not alone.
I want to dig into the siloed departments, because I think that is much more the norm than it is, and it's an exception when a brand has these culture and when a company has brand and culture inextricably linked. I think it's an exception. It's not a norm. And I want to dig into that with you guys a little bit. Like, who does own all of that responsibility, and how has that shifted over time? Or has it shifted over time and it's always been there, but now we all just look through things through a different lens? And what do companies need to do to enable this change? And is it monumental, or is it minor shifts that they can do to make things, more inextricably linked on this?
Wow, that's quite a few questions in there, but I think they all have the same answer.
Well, that's why I asked.
Yeah, which is leadership. So, I don't know if that was sort of a leading set of questions, but, for me, it starts with the leadership. So if you've got a CEO, like we were blessed to have at Eurostar, in the wonderful Richard Brown, who totally got the importance of, sort of Dan and I, DDS and I were like, his little kids, like his favorite kids in the gang. And he totally got the delivery of both these things, the brand and the culture, were vitally important delivery. That's why he asked us to lead the sort of change when we moved from Waterloo to St Pancras. If you've got a leadership that understands the importance of both and that live and breathe it from the top, that they're the ones that have to own it. Yeah, we were also blessed with a remarkable CFO who was quite happy to invest in all these things, God rest his soul. And if you've got that in the people at the top, and a great chief commercial officer who just said, get on with it, then that's where the silos break. That's where the silos can break. That's where it can really, that perfect marriage can happen. Everyone feels the need and the pride in the brand, and that they understand how to turn up for work every day because it's in the cultural fabric, and it's rocket fuel. Because if you've got customer understanding what they're going to get, and then the people in the business delivering on it in that way, everyone's motivated and aligned. It's amazing. But you're right, it's rare. And actually, interestingly, in the prep for this, trying to think of examples. I mean, listen, this is why I set up Glow, right? I recognize the gap that people either are doing brand or they're doing culture. And never the twain shall meet. But it is rare. There are very few brands, DDS. I know a couple of people that work for Apple that are happy, but of course, with a big organization, that's always not going to be the case. But often, you look under the bonnet, and you get a very different experience, like when you worked into Eurostar. I don't know if I answered that question, but
you did. I want to hear from DDS, and then I actually have a couple of follow-ups on it.
Well, I think, I think that, what we're talking to here is both the benefits and the drawbacks of a maturing organization. When you pass that 150 point, and you have to put in structures, and you have to put in policies and processes in order to future-proof the business and allow it to continue to grow. And the downside of that is that it introduces silos. So the remedy, the antidote to those silos is relationships and rapport. Because what you get in silos, or what you can get in silos, is people that are like, get off my lawn kind of thing, swim in your own lane, get out of my business. And of course, what Emma's talking about, brand being owned by everyone, and what I'm talking about, which is culture being owned by everyone, in a siloed organization where people are watching their backs and keeping themselves to themselves, and don't want interference from other departments, then you're going to get that silo. So the idea that the idea of ensuring that you think about relationships, and that you use your culture to guide, or your cultural fabric to guide those relationships and to deepen the rapport, so that people are clear on their accountabilities and are clear on what's got to be delivered, but there is also a shared ownership. And I agree with Emma that starts at the very top of the organization. So having a CEO and an executive team that are bought into, and are aligned on this. And I think, I would say this because I was part of it, but I think Essence did that really, really well. They gave culture a seat at the top table. But that wasn't good enough, right? The person occupying that seat, which was me, couldn't just go ahead and do whatever I wanted to do. It had to be about relationships. It had to be about collaboration. It had to be about building trust. And it had to be about making other people feel safe, and included and involved in the decision-making process. That's when the magic happens.
And I can actually talk to the fact that Essence, being part of Group M, Essence did have a very different, they just acted and behaved differently, and the brand had a different mystique to it versus the rest of the Group M agencies. So I will give you a...
If I had hair, I would be flicking it.
Okay, well, I'll do a flick for you.
I'll flick for you.
Exactly. But one of the things, and Em, you touched on it really briefly, and I want to go back and dig into this a little bit, is right now we're talking about it all from the internal perspective, right? HR, marketing, leadership. I want to bring in the external perspective, your clients, your consumers, right? Because they drive a lot of this. And I would say that this generation are forcing people to, and forcing companies and individuals to behave in ways that they never dreamed that they would have to. So I want to jump in and really dig into the role of the consumer or the client, because my gut tells me, and that initially somebody would go, oh, well, that's for the brand, but is it? I think it's actually just as much for the culture and the brand. So I'd love to here it's just initially when people think things versus what really needs to be done to be successful and to have that immediate connection in a way that differentiates. So
I
go ahead, jump in.
I think now more than ever, it's always been important, because when you touch a business, when you touch a company as a consumer or a customer, your expectations are set by the communication, which is the kind of external brand. But, I mean, as someone who also sits on a board of a social media agency, this is another thing. Social media keeps us on our toes, right? You can no longer afford to say one thing and do another, because you will get exposed. And your brand shouldn't only inform the way you behave and your mindset and your behaviors, but also your purpose. And if all the brands now, this, purpose is so important. CSR, giving back, all what's in the fabric of us as humans, as a business. And because of that, with that, you have to walk the walk. You have to, and consumers will not let you get away with it. And that consumer voice, social media has given consumers a voice, and a very powerful voice. When people talk about cancel culture, well, for me, if it's holding people accountable, if in all of the political landscape of the last few years, with Black Lives Matter, with all the LGBTQ issues, it's with female, with gender politics, pronouns, all the stuff we're all learning. The consumer's voice is loud, and so it should be, because it keeps brands on their toes. And again, if you're clear on those brand values, if they're properly embedded in the culture, come up against challenges like that, there will be an easier way to respond. They'll know exactly what that lens looks like, because this is who we are. This is our purpose. Nike, they'll say, you know what, if you want to burn our trainers because we support people taking the knee, go burn them. We don't want you. So it's having that real clarity on who you are as a brand that goes into your culture and connects with the right consumers. Being a brand is polarizing. I'm always talking to whether you're B2C or B2B, by the way, being a brand is polarizing. You can't, if you want to be vanilla and chase the money and be a blah with everyone, that's not a brand. So if you're going to stand for something and be part of that, then, that's brave. But that's what being a brand is all about. Mm. Why are you laughing at me? Am I using my hands too much?
No, you're cutting in and out.
It's who you are. So I wouldn't.
Oh, I'm cutting in and out. Oh, that's really annoying. Sorry.
That's okay. DDS, I'd like to say your rebuttal, but I'm going to go with your build on that, or your POV.
Yeah, it's not a rebuttal. I agree, right? I think your cultural fabric is both informed by and also shapes your customer experience. Right. So if relationships are the wellspring of your climate and your culture, those relationships not only include your consumers, but also include your suppliers. Now, I think the really smart brands wrestle with the conversation between, should we engage with this customer type or not? Right. The really smart brands, as Emma said, are polarizing. If you appeal to everyone, then you appeal to no one. And so when you use your cultural fabric and your brand proposition to make decisions on which customers you're going to engage with, so that your employees then also have an experience from your customers that matches and mirrors the intention set out in your culture, it continues to build the climate that you want to have. So I'm with you, Em.
Listen, I get it. And I hear both of you loud and clear. One of the things, by the way, so growing up in this industry for so many years, I've continually heard people say to me, B2B and B2C are totally different, right? And how they market or how they have to behave are different. And I have never felt that way. But I would like to ask you guys in this brand culture debate, B2B versus B2C. Yeah, different, not, how do they work through this?
I mean, I'm conscious of time, Ange, because we need to wrap up soon. So I'm going to answer this really quickly. I'm always saying to B2C, if B2B clients, If you think you're any different, you'll end up commoditized. Because if you don't use your brands to differentiate and you talk about what you do, which is what B2B brands do a lot, then you're just going to end up competing on price. Brand will be the thing that creates loyalty and differentiation.
And my simple answer, people are people wherever they work and whichever sector they work in, and all people thrive in relationship and in corporate climates where they experience belonging and purpose.
Yeah, very insightful from both of you.
We have a question, Ange, before we wrap up. We do have a question.
Okay,
We've got
two. Yep, so question from Parish, who is part of the Blipper family. How do you change evolve culture since it needs to be anchored in authenticity? Can you seed enough change to affect culture?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on size and scale, I think, in terms of what you need to do in order to change and evolve culture. But how do you change it? The quickest way to become something is to be the thing you want to become. And so you show up in and you create and you install the behaviors that are going to create the climate that is in line with the cultural fabric that you want to shift towards. And behavior is contagious, and so that's where it rests again with leadership. Your culture and your climate is going to be shaped by the worst behavior you're willing to tolerate in your most senior person. And so that's where you start.
What happens if it's all the way at the top?
You change the person at the top.
I was just being provocative for a reason.
I was being truthful. You change the person at the top. Like, if you want the brand to survive, you change the person at the top.
Yeah. And then building on that, we had another question, which was around how do you maintain a transparent work culture?
Well, that's really hard, right? Like, because, mushrooms grow well when you keep them in the dark and feed them crap. And the same does not apply to humans, right? Humans work best when they have context and they have communication and they have clarity. But that doesn't mean to say that everything is up for transparency, right? Because there are certain things that are commercially sensitive. There are certain things that you don't want to communicate to employees because there's such a thing as change fatigue and change overload. So you keep transparency by making sure that you're taking people on a journey, that you that you are communicating and sharing. And by the way, when I talk communication, I don't mean one way, I mean both ways, so that employees feel like they're influencing as much as they're being influenced. That's
super. All right. So I'm going to give you guys like 30 seconds, give your final pitch on your POV. And then for everybody, we are going to do a poll at the end of this as well. So Emma, go ahead.
Okay, I'm just going to answer JC's question, which is which one takes long to fix when it goes wrong? Culture, no doubt. Because
sorry,
that's okay. Because I'm always saying, changing your brand doesn't have to cost the earth or take forever. But that's just the first bit. Brand is just the first bit. It's just the tip of the iceberg. But embedding it across the business is the work. My summary, listen, we're out of time, so I'm just going to say it's really hard to say which one's more important. I don't think one is more important than the other. My argument purely is that it starts with the brand. I think DDS slightly pissed on his own argument by talking about Simon Sinek, but it starts with the why. It starts with the why. You start with that and everything else follows. It's a continuous loop though, but it starts with the brand.
Yeah, well, I'm in the space of it's not chicken or egg, it's chicken and egg, and neither comes first. They both do.
And I understand that. All right, so we're going to do a quick poll coming up at the end of this, and we are going to ask you guys to answer brand, culture, or both.
Who eats who for breakfast? That's the question.
Who eats who?
I'm not allowed to vote.
You are not.
I tried to vote.
Do we even get to see the results?
I think so.
Results.
All right. So, has everyone's voted? Do we get to see the vote?
Results.
Da, da, da.
I know, exactly.
Okay. Have everyone voted? Remember all those people I said I would pay you handsomely?
Do, 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 do. All right, we should be good, right?
Okay.
Everybody
So
voted?
can you publish the results or tell us in a chat? Oh, here we go. Oh, there we go. 71% of people said both. 18% said brand, 11% said culture, and 71% said both.
You're
So
a persuasive woman, Emma Harris. You're a persuasive woman.
But listen, the whole point, as we both said, it has got to be both. That's the reason why we set up Glow. That's the reason why we work together. It's got to be both. It's just starts with the brand.
I just want to say thank you guys for the opportunity to moderate you and to have this amazing conversation about something that is near and dear to all three of our hearts.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ange. That was
Ange.
Great fun. And thank you everyone for coming. Really appreciate you spending the time with us.
Yeah. And thank you, Hemingway and Harper, for interrupting us as well.
Logan hasn't stirred. He's asleep on my feet.
As he's in her playpen. So
Right, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening.
Bye, everyone.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
In brand and culture we love. Goodbye.